Hello, friends. Welcome to the 2020 Virtual Gaithersburg Book Festival, or as we like to call it, the VGBF. I am Phil Kaminsky, your VGBF host, and although we miss hosting you in person, we're so happy that you've chosen to spend your time with us for this afternoon's watch party, which is the final featured presentation of the 2020 festival. Before we dive into today's main event, I'm going to ask you to do two little tiny but super important things for us. First, please like this video. Second, leave a comment below to let us know where you're watching us from. Also, we ask you to please support today's featured author by purchasing her book through our partner and independent bookseller, Politics and Prose. Lastly, a big thank you goes out to today's featured sponsors, the David and Mikel Blair Family Foundation, Downtown Crown RPAI, and Montgomery College. Okay, let's get started. Today, we are so lucky to have with us Maria Russo, co-author of the book, How to Raise a Reader, an indispensable guide to welcoming children, from babies to teens, to a lifelong love of reading. Maria is the children's books editor of the New York Times Book Review. She has been a writer and editor at the Los Angeles Times, the New York Observer, and Salon, and holds a PhD in English Comparative Literature from Columbia University. Interviewing Maria today is Kathie Weinberg. Kathie is co-director of the We Need Diverse Books Walter Award, a consultant with the Library of Congress, and an active member of the American Library Association. Welcome to the program, Maria and Kathie.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Phil, thank you for that nice introduction.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Maria, How to Raise a Reader. That is it. I love your book. It's an indispensable and fun guide with on a slightly intimidating topic. Can you tell me why you and Pamela decided to write the book? I mean, how that came about?
Well, first of all, possibly most important, Pamela, Paul, my co-author, and I both are the mothers of 3 children. And we both have been working at the New York Times Book Review and are really aware of what's going on out there when it comes to kids and books. People ask me constantly for advice, for tips, and increasingly, and Pamela too had this experience, increasingly there's a tone of anxiety and worry around the way people talk about kids and books. So we started this book as an online digital guide, just very short, called How to Raise a Reader. And it got such a great response. It was, went viral, on the internet. They made us realize this is a book that people really need to own and to hold in their hands, and to pass on, because there's a real need out there. So it was really such a joy to write this book, to be able to go a little bit longer than you can just in an online short thing, and to really get the information out there that parents need when they're trying to keep their kids interested in books, trying to create a home that's positive around reading.
Well, and I love the format of your book. You kind of start with general topic, and then you do go to each age range, and including newborns. So I think that's a wonderful format, and I'm actually going to borrow liberally from it in our discussion today. But so we'll start with general, and just a kind of overriding question is, what makes us readers, and what steps can we do as parents to make a reader of our child?
Well, you mentioned that we'd start with newborns, and we even have one tip that's before your baby even arrives. Make sure that you're a reader. Make sure that you're taking time to keep books in your own life, and that your own reading life doesn't kind of fall out of play when you become a parent, right? Because we all know a new baby arrives and everything's chaos, everything's changed, your routine is all in disarray. It's really important, even starting then when you can, to make sure that you're connected to your reading life, because it only gets harder, when you lose that habit and you start to, your home is sort of given over to parenting. But in fact, the research shows that having parents who read and having a home that's full of books is an important factor in developing a lifelong reader. So, and this was really interesting research for us, because it was selected for income and education. So this wasn't just about bookie educated people raising bookie educated children. There's something about the presence of a lot of books in the home that disposes a child to grow up to be a reader. So keep books in your house, and grown-up books, children's books, cookbooks, map books, photography books. Your house should have a lot of really beautiful and interesting printed matter in it. And you as a parent your child needs that visual of you sitting on a Saturday afternoon or, in the evening as you're, waiting for dinner to finish cooking or whatever, that you snatch that time and you're sitting with a book and your child can see that. That becomes very important in creating the idea that, oh yeah, this is our family culture. In this house, people read, people enjoy reading.
What to go off a little bit on the side, just the process of learning to read. I mean, you talk about you want to raise readers, but the learning to read, and you have a statement in your book, which I think is really interesting. School is where children learn how to read, and home is where children read because they want to.
Right.
What are you saying to parents in that?
So and it's funny because now, of course, the school has come into the home a little bit, but so this is even more important now, I think, that our kids are learning at home for the most part. You need to create this. The teachers are responsible to teach your children to read, to track your children's progress in the steps of learning to read and comprehension and all of that. Leave that to the teachers. Your job is to teach them how to love to read. It's not going to do any good if they're like crackerjack readers. They can find the topic sentence, they can do all the things that the teachers are teaching them to do, but they don't want to.
Yeah.
Right? That what you want to do is make sure that they choose to read, and that reading is something that you have created this sort of sprinkle a little fairy dust around. It's like, oh wow, there's a new Dog Man book. Did you see the new dog? For your 7-year-old, this is the book that every 7-year-old is really excited about when there's a new one. The Raina Telgemeier books. Keep excitement and interest around books and not pressure. A lot of parents, a lot of what's happened. It's funny because we talk about all the anxiety around reading that parents have absorbed. And it's really, I think, coming from two directions. So on the one hand, there's all of the screens, right? All of the distractions, all of our worries that this is just a digital culture. They don't care about reading, which I don't believe, but there's a lot of worry that kids are going to only be on screens and not read books in the future. But on the other hand, there's pressure coming because people see reading as so important to their child's education and success that they come down too hard with pressure on their kids to use reading as a way to, perform and to achieve and to climb the ladder of, reading levels or stuff like that. And we really encourage parents, don't talk about books as that's too easy for you or that's too hard. Let your child find books they love and let them read those books and enjoy those books and share the enthusiasm, show excitement when your child chooses to read a particular book, even if you think, you might, and I plead guilty of this, you might in the back of your mind be going like, oh, why that big Nate? It's so dumb. I did that with my older son and I really regret it. And of course he was like, Mom, that's the point. Let them read what they want to read and show enthusiasm and show curiosity. Ask a question. What is it about Big Nate that you love so much? Instead of just coming right down with like, oh, that's a waste of your time.
Right. Yeah. Well, my stumbling block was George and Martha. I just thought it was kind of boring.
Oh, I love those books.
I know. I don't, but that's just the side.
Yeah, right. Well, that actually make a really good point, though, is that, you're a parent who, you were a kid once, right? You had books that you loved. You have to be ready for your kids maybe not to love the same books that you love.
Right. Yeah.
And let them discover their self and their life through the books that are available to them now, right?
Right.
Taste maybe a little bit in the background here.
Well, and that is so true. But the other thing, one of the points of your book that is so interesting to me, so I think the parents will like this, is reading aloud, the importance of reading aloud. And it's not just reading to your toddler It's reading as a family, and especially now with all this going on. Do you want to talk a little bit about
Yeah,
that?
it's just a great thing to do. And, when you have a baby, you've probably heard about this, right? The importance of reading out loud to your baby. And it's so subtle. Some of the reasons it's important are so subtle that it's really worth going over them and reminding yourself. I mean, I think this section of the book is really important, the section on babies and reading aloud to babies, because it really, and toddlers especially, it could not be more important for them, for their brain development, their social emotional development, for them to hear a lot of words, and not just any words. It's not the same as when they hear words on the television or even radio, podcast. It's not the same. They need that constructed literary language. There's something about that language that helps the brain to do the development it needs to do, that will eventually result in the child being an independent reader. So the more, and we often talk about, you've probably heard the idea that babies need to just hear a lot of words, right, in order to be familiar with those words. Well, I found when my first child was born, I found it kind of hard to talk to a baby. I didn't know a lot about babies. I wasn't comfortable. So how do you fill your baby's world with words? One good way is to read aloud a lot. Mm-hmm. So that's something we really encourage parents to do, just read a lot. And then of course, it establishes a ritual. So the more you can establish rituals in your home around reading, the benefits are they just skyrocket as the children get older. Because first of all, it's a way to, you start it with a baby, and the babies sort of can't go anywhere, right? When you're reading to them, you have a captive audience. But what about a toddler that can scoot away and run away? The more it's a routine for that toddler, the more the toddler will get out of it and will be able to sit with it, And then as they get older, it becomes an incredible bond and comfort for children, that moment. Most people do it before bed, but we encourage finding time during the day, if you can too, to read aloud, to be snuggling close. As they get older, sometimes you sort of you don't have as much opportunity for that physical closeness as you did when you were zippering their jackets and dressing them and, feeding them and all of that. So that nightly reading ritual is just so rich. And it's just one of the best parts of being I found, the memories of reading out loud to my children as they were growing are just some of the strongest memories I have now. So you're creating that, and in fact, speaking of learning to read, this is an interesting thing. What we also found a lot of research, and one of our strong recommendations is, don't stop reading aloud to your child once your child is learning to read on his own or her own, because then it almost becomes like a punishment, oh, you're reading on your own, now you don't get to be read to anymore. And in fact, they treasure that reading time, and they're afraid to lose it. So it might hold them back in their independent reading if they think that, oh, now I won't have my reading time with dad or with mom anymore.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's an interesting point, and one that you kind of forget, because once you kind of launch them into reading, then that reading aloud, keep that in mind.
Yeah, keep that going in your family. And now, of course, we all have so many hours to fill. It's a really good, there's so many great books. And remember, the great picture books, they're written in order to be read by an adult. Those were, don't forget that. Picture books are for all ages. If you have older children and babies, the words and the picture books are speaking to the older children too. and the babies, don't be so quick to throw everything out and to not invite the older children in to hear some of the stuff for the younger children.
Well, that really is important. Let's move on a little bit to reader's advisory, your child's preferences. As a librarian, I was in a public library, and a parent would come in with a child, and the parent would say, well, my child wants a historical fiction book because that's his favorite genre. And you look at the child who was kind of rolling his eyes, and he might say, actually, I'd like a fantasy book because that's what I read. So how do you, as a parent, respect your child's preferences, but also encourage them a little bit beyond their comfort level?
Branch out. Well, this is really the $64 million. This is a great question, and a lot of parents, I think have some resistance to what their kids really want to read. So, and some of it, what we're trying to do in the book is really debunk some of the resistance that people have to the books that that really, I guarantee you, almost every kid loves, and that's graphic novels, for example. You know, that's one example. So that I can come up with a book right now that child will love, that is historical, and has little fantasy elements in it, you know, but it's a graphic novel, you know. Like, you know, I'm talking about, like, for example, Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales, this incredible series of American history, tales of actual American history, you know, from slavery to the Donner Pass, you know, the Donner Party, to the Alamo, to World War I, all told in graphic novel form. You know, so that's a book where the mom's going to be happy and the kid's going to be happy if it's a history-loving kid, you know. So one thing I think is really important in this realm is for parents, and again, this is where the information in our book is really useful. And when we were really, you know, interested to see there's research behind all this stuff, there's a big, and I'm sure you know this as a librarian, there's a big change going on in how we understand the role of visuals in reading words, right? Illustrations, and comics. You know, there had been for a long time sort of resistance or feeling like, oh, that's not a real book, it's comics. That's not true. If they're reading a book with, you know, there's not enough words on that page, is it really reading? Well, that's not how reading works, it turns out. You know, the research is showing that reading images and reading words just uses two different sides of your brain. And they should have, you know, MRIs of the brains of children who are reading. The ones who are reading graphic novels and illustrated books, the right side and the left side are lighting up at the same time. And that's great. That's actually really good for their brains. Yeah. So, you know, when you have books like these really well done graphic novels that are out there now, and graphic nonfiction that use words and images together, that's even better for your child. And we really want people to lose this worry that their children need to be always reading big chunky blocks of words in order to count as reading. Those days are gone. You know, that's not how our culture works anymore. We're a very visual culture. You know, like when someone sends you a text and you don't really feel like writing the words, you just send the thumbs up. You know, it's the same thing. Like we communicate more in images now, along with our words. And this is available to kids in their books. And it's a way to keep them reading and keep them interested. Especially, you know, the other elephant in the room when you talk about kids and reading is boys, right? Boys consistently say in surveys that they're less likely to choose to read a book during their leisure time. They're less likely to have read any book over the summer break. You know, some of it is because boys' brains are more visual. They prefer, especially in those early years, we were before this current wave of illustrated books, we're losing entire groups of boys who just, by the time they're 7 or 8, they're not ready to read big chunks of words, and they just don't want to. Now we have those books, you know, it's the wimpy kids and the, you know, Dork Diaries and, you know, Dog Man and Captain Underpants, these geniuses who really saved these kids and gave them books. So, you know, you have to keep positive about giving your kids these graphic books if that's what they prefer. And of course, there's a few like me, you know, when I was a kid, I just loved a big chunk of text, but especially the boys, they're visual. They want graphic novels, and there's great graphic novels out there now, you know.
Yeah, no, they really are. I think that is really helpful, especially the parents of boys. But you know, talking about now, as we're recording this, we're you know, social distancing, libraries are closed, bookstores are closed. You know, we're kind of not getting together, sharing things as much. So you know, kids are reading maybe more on a tablet, or maybe they're listening audiobooks. Maybe they're looking on their parents' phone, or maybe they have their own phone. So what do you tell us? How, you know, what's the value? You know, if you can't read an actual book, physical book, versus some of these other resources.
Yeah, well, this is really interesting too, as far as the research goes. You know, the research is really clear that we don't absorb and retain information as well when we read it on a screen as we do when we read it on paper. And now this is true for us, for adults, but it's even more true for children.
Really?
Because they're developing brains. They're developing brains. It's just woo, you know. But when they read it on paper, they're able to process that information more. So in general, you know, our recommendation in the book, and as we're talking now, is when possible, lean toward paper, lean toward printed books. It's better for your kids, development as a reader. And it's also just, in all these other ways, a great part of life to have books around. However, we all know right now, especially, that can be really difficult. So two things I would say about that. One is, if you have to, especially when it comes to series, one thing that happens when your child hits like 7 or 8, say, or 9, and they're really just first getting their momentum as readers, a lot of what they're going to want to read is in series, right? So,
yeah, right.
They read book 1 of the Warriors series, or
Alana or something.
Fire,
yeah.
Right? And they're before you know it, they're on to book 11, and so we're realistic. Like, you just might not be able to get every one of those. That might be a chance you might just do that digitally, because they're involved in the series. Although I will say, swapping with those series is a great idea. I mean, if they usually, when they like them, their friends like them too. So if you can kind of communicate with the parents and swap. So there might be times when you sort of do go to the digital version just because you're feeling a desire. The other thing I would say about the time we're in now, of people being at home, not having access to the libraries, the indie bookstore in my town is open, or you pick up, we pick up at the back door.
Right.
But there is a limit, to how much you can really buy, But I hope so, as long as you are, when, for the big good books, really support that indie bookstore. But the other, it's a point we make in the book, and again, it's research-based. Rereading is really good for kids, and they often feel pressure not to reread. A lot of parents are like, didn't you read that already? Or is that on your level still? Forget all of that, because it turns out rereading is really, really good for the younger children, because it's, just helping them, with their reading development. For the older children, there's a category of book that I'm sure as a librarian, called the comfort book. And these are the books that children return to again and again because it comforts them. It's like going to hang out with an old friend. So now is a good time to really encourage rereading the books that they especially loved, and without any, and as a positive thing. So so rereading is always good. And then the final thing I will say, this was fascinating to me. The research shows that audiobooks are reading. So as opposed to, listening to the radio or something like that, audiobooks, because the language is composed, the brain, the MRIs of the brain show that people listening to an audiobook are doing the exact same process in their brain as when they're reading it themselves. Oh, wow. So this is a time where I just say, go with the audiobooks. And feel good about it. You're giving your child a book. Your child is reading when they're listening to an audiobook.
Okay, no, that is wonderful advice. Yeah, it really is. Book content. Sometimes your child selects a book that you think is too scary, maybe too sad, or maybe like you really view it as kind of poorly written. So what do you do as a parent? Do you just kind of encourage them to go elsewhere? So what are your views on that?
Again, this, when it comes to a book that you just think is badly written, or just not up to your standards, which, believe me, I've been there many times, back off. It's just not up to you to decide.
Still reading.
You don't know what they're getting out of that book.
Yeah.
It's just, but as far as a book that you think is too scary or too sad, that is really an interesting thing that all parents grapple with. I can remember when our oldest daughter was about 9, was when the Hunger Games first came out, and my husband and I were just like, no way, that's a bridge too far. She was a fantasy reader, and but we were like, this is, we were just, it sounds quaint now, right? But this was that was like a big conversation.
Children killing other children. Yeah.
Like, oh, kids want to read the Hunger Games. I'm just not going there, And so what we did was we had a conversation with her, and she had a very good explanation for why she was interested in it. She assured us that she could handle it, and that her friends could handle it. This is the kind of thing they talked about, that they liked. The kids who like that dystopian fiction it's serving a purpose for them. You know, their life is hard, you know, even in the best circumstances. Being 11 and 10 and 12 years old has a lot of hard moments and a lot of struggle. And some kids really like to see extreme versions of children suffering and struggling. And it helps them to process their own relatively easy, you know, our privilege here, struggles. So we really encourage parents to have faith that your child can handle difficult subject matter more than, you know, you're still maybe thinking of them as 5 and 6 years old, but the fact that they're out there in the world, they know about addiction, they know about suicide, unfortunately. You know, they hear this in their peer groups, they know about eating disorders. Wouldn't you rather have them learn more about those subjects in a book that is edited by professionals, written by people who really care? You know, these children's writers now that take on these issues, they inform themselves, they see themselves as ambassadors to their readers. They're out there, you know, almost, some of them say they feel like they've become social workers because they have to respond to their readers, you know, going through these problems. So really don't, if you're a parent worried that the subject matter is too much for your child, talk to your child, ask them why they're interested. And then realize that these are subjects they might not be comfortable talking about with you as their parent, but they do need to know. They do need to understand what's going on in the world. And a book is a great place to do that.
Well, speaking of trying to understand what's going on in the world, the need for, and the push recently for diversity in books. There are more books being published by diverse authors, more subject matter, the characters are different race, for, you know, religion, cultures. So how, I mean, that's kind of a wonderful change, but how do you feel is that impacting reading now?
It's just a huge change and a wonderful, great change, right? That, you know, children's books were, as you know, working with the We Need Diverse Books organization, which I think is a great example of a group that pushed for change and it worked.
Yes.
They made a change. The publishing industry is a very white industry. It still is. And 10 years ago, it was even more so. There weren't books published that showed children of color, children from different cultural backgrounds, even children with different family structures, you know, as protagonists, as just normal kids going about their life, you know. Every book about an African-American child doesn't have to be about slavery.
I know, yes.
About grappling with racism. You know, parents of color want books that show kids being kids.
Yeah, everyday life.
Now, you know, the visuals that was where it's possibly the most egregious, right? Picture books that are so universal in their story, and then you take a look at who the kids are, and they would just all be white. You know, that's not true anymore. You know, the more recent picture books, it's rare to find one that everybody's white and only the boys are being active and the girls are, you know, other gender stereotypes.
Sewing.
Yeah. So this is just a great thing that's happened. You know, I talked about the change toward more understanding of visual books and graphic novels and comics as central to children learning to read. That has gone hand in hand with the other big change in children's books, which is the diversity that we see now, that shows, as you say, it shows the world as it really is. Because even if your child is white, your child needs to grow up and work in a world that is diverse. A world, you know, a global community that they're part of. They're part of a country that has many different races and ethnic groups trying to form a union. You know, your child needs to be able to see from another point of view. Your child needs to be able to see, you know, and frankly, you know, some of even the more well-meaning, some of the older books perpetuate the stereotypes because they just, you know, even just, you know, parents of color tell me, even just having to, their child having to see over and over again racist language and racist stereotypes, even if that is punished in the book, they've still been exposed to it. You know, so it's not a terrible thing to say, why not give your book, even if your child is white, make sure that your child sees all perspectives, all points of view, reads books with all different kinds of characters in them, because it prepares them for life and it helps them build empathy. It helps them empathy is a good life skill. Understanding you don't alienate, you don't inadvertently alienate the people you work with, say, who are of different races. Like, this is a skill every child needs. And the books today, another great reason to, get out there to the bookstores, get out there into the libraries, talk to the librarians, talk to the booksellers who know what are the great books. I'm sure you were excited when the Newbery Medal this year, right, the most prestigious, important medal for a children's book every year, went to not just a graphic novel, but a graphic novel by an African-American writer about an African-American kid. It's New Kid by Jerry Craft. Will now have that big shiny Newbery Medal on it. It will be, one for the ages. So this book to me is the perfect example of what's so great about kids' books now. It's a fantastic story about, an African-American kid who's an artist, who goes to a private school, who's mostly white private school, and has to navigate, not just being a new kid, but being one of the few children of color in this school, and also being an artist, being someone who really prefers to go off to the side and draw everything, So it's just a great book. Jerry Craft is just an incredible, artist and writer and thinker. So that book is just a great book that any kid would love. It's on the bestseller list, right now, no doubt. This is what's great about those awards. Those awards can bring attention to books that, were doing okay, but now every kid is going to know, oh, I see that big medal, and every parent on New Kid. And it's a story, it's an African-American boy, but it's for everyone, that book.
Right. Well, and that's actually for Reader's Advisory, a lot of times librarians will pull out the Newbery, Caldecott lists and stuff. But also, though, as a parent, when you start reading to your child or enjoying, you think back about the books that meant a lot to you. And some of them are classics. So you talked just a little bit ago about, the need for diversity, but yet sometimes when you start reading aloud to your child a classic, you'll find that actually they're kind of violent. There might be racist. Is there still a play? How do you deal with that?
We talk about this all the time. When it's picture books and you're the one doing the reading, you can change the words. Yeah. I find especially the way that parents talk to children is in the older books is wow, it's really sharp and nasty and dismissive, and ways that we don't tend to hear parents talking so much. Pamela recently, her child was reading the Judy Blume Tales of a Fourth Grade Nothing and Blubber. Oh my God, the fat shaming and the kids just casually call each other really nasty names, and so in the picture books, I really recommend changing the words when you can. There's no reason that those words can't be cleaned up and made more palatable, made better for your child. But also by the time they're reading, the great books, Judy Blume is fantastic, right? Little House on the Prairie, even, I would say, you can have the conversation with them.
Right. And it's so nice, like the Little House on the Prairie now with Linda Sue Park and her new book, Lotus. Oh, it's just,
Prairie Lotus,
Prairie Lotus. Yes.
Yeah. If you have a kid who loves Little House on the Prairie, that's a great point. I highly recommend that you do what you can to make sure that they read Prairie Lotus by Linda Sue Park, about an Asian American girl who's living in those same era. Yeah. In that same era on the prairie, and has to, can't even go to school because the rest of the town won't let her in. She's resilient and comes up with her own way. And also the Louise Erdrich series, Birch Bark House. Yes. Love those. Those are literally, the same story as Little House on the Prairie, but from a Native point of view, the Native communities that were living in that same area and, during that same time. And, it's all that same great information about how do you survive in the woods and in the middle of the 1800s. So really pairing some of the older books with newer books that do show a more diverse point of view and that aren't racist. It's good.
Yeah. Well, it's fun because we're this is the Gaithersburg Book Festival, and we're talking we're going virtual, but then when you think about one of the points in your book, you talk about the value of actually meeting an author or illustrator and seeing that they are male, female, funny, serious, whatever. You want to talk? We don't have that opportunity at this festival right now, but you can meet them online.
Because, for so many kids, that first time they meet an author that they read, it's just an incredible, forever memory that they're going to have, so anytime you can bring your child to meet the author of a book that they love and have the book signed to them, even they can keep it forever, that's so worthwhile. And it's helping create this sort of, the fairy dust around reading, that reading is this sort of fun, magical world full of interesting people, and so you want to really make sure that they can do that. And the thing to remember also is these children's books writers and illustrators today are real entertainers, because
they are.
One of the sort of dirty secrets of the book world now. It's really hard to make a living as a full-time author, right? Just by selling books. Very, very few people actually do that. Most people who write books have some other gig on the side. But for these children's books authors, many of them, what their gig is going into schools, going into bookstores, going into libraries and doing their presentations. And they're really good. They know that their audience involves children and adults. So they're funny. They have stuff for the adults. They have stuff for the children. If you ever do have a chance, some of them are so good that they're really ticketed, like Dave Pilkey, he fills arenas. He filled the Library of Congress. And
he did, yes.
It sold out. I think the tickets went in like 3 hours when they first put them online, because he's such a good entertainer. I've seen him do these shows many times. Every time your heart, when you laugh. And so any chance you have to take your kid to see an author and meet an author, it's really worthwhile. And again, it's helping them to create, the whole idea that we have in the book about raising a reader is not to take books and rope them off to the side as part of school or part of, stuff that's good for you. You need to create, books are just entertainment too. We want you to have a sense of the fun of books and of the curiosity quenching, so going to see authors is part of that process of creating books, bring books into your world, not as this special, important, success meter, but as just like something that we love to do.
It was fun. Dave Pilkey was at the Library of Congress recently, and it was kind of like the auditorium was full of kids, and it was like a rock star came into the room. And he's a rock star. He's very giving, yes. Okay, well, we've kind of done some general discussions, but maybe move on to some specific ages and, and some suggestions from you.
Sure.
Newborns, you talked about that a little bit, but in some ways, you bring a new baby home from the hospital and you're trying to fit them into your life and change their diaper and feed them. How do you find time? What's the importance and how do you find time?
Yeah, you really, obviously if you can work, and you hear this everywhere, so I'm probably not the first person to say this to the parents of babies, but work a book into your bedtime routine. A lot of people do the 3 Bs, bath, book, bed, bath, book, bedtime, really, that's a great, easy way, because then it's just, this is what we do at night, finding, when you go out into the world, when you can go out into the world again, the great thing for newborns, and really these are my favorite, in some ways, my favorite books for babies ever, are the board books. They're smaller, they're chunkier, they're really sturdy. And if you can and in your diaper bag, just throw board books all the time. Because once your toddler, by the time they're like 2, it's very likely that they'll have memorized some of those great board books that they love. The Sandra Boynton board books. Yes. I think I could say a lot of them by heart now.
Brown Bear.
Brown Bear, what do you see?
Yeah.
So your child can read the book, and they'll, a 2-year-old will be fine to, instead of handing them your phone, hand them a board book. It's not that much bigger than your phone, so when you're out and about. So just keeping books around, keep a lot of books in your house, your coffee table. When you have toddlers, sorry to say for the decor, experts, but a coffee table is a great surface to put books for your toddler. that they can pick up randomly. You might, clutter when it comes to books is a good thing. Other kinds of clutter I'm not a fan of, but you want to keep a lot of books around that your toddler can kind of just pick up, and your every child, your preschool kid, your elementary school kid, lots of art, lots of photography, lots of visual stuff. So so just kind of keeping the routine of reading, keeping lots of board books around. The other thing that's really important for the newborn and the baby age is, lift the flap books with some sort of manual component, like turn the wheel, lift the flap. I really don't recommend buzzing and lights. That's kind of upping the stakes, and it's too much stimulation. But what they really benefit from, and again, this is the research is showing that using your hands while engaged with a book actually helps develop reading in a baby and a preschooler. There's something about that multi-sensory experience. So the more that you can make the book experience for your babies multi-sensory, the better it is for their brain and for their future learning to become an independent reader. So those books are just, and again, this does come down to the girls and the boys too, the boy brain and the girl brain. The male brain, we know, likes to be moving when they learn and when they process information. And the female brain is more comfortable and able to sit still. This is the elementary school teachers, parents, know this, but feel that it's maybe just my son who's like that. No, it's many of the boys are like this. So those active books are really good. And I love them. Lift the flap, sometimes they just are so innovative with like pieces of fabric and turning the wheel and things, making things happen in the book is a really good thing for your toddler.
Right, yeah. Well, as a librarian, the board books don't last very long. We cycle through them pretty quickly because they're sturdy. They're much loved.
Experience, right? Yes. And that's what you want. Yeah. Yes. That's why I tell people also, I reached a point where I only give books as baby shower gifts, and board books, and newborn gifts. People really appreciate it. And most books are really great hand-me-down, but board books, not so great hand-me-down. Yes. You need new copies of the board books for your baby, or gently used, right. Is fine.
Well, speaking of a baby shower gift, I think your book, How to Raise a Reader, would be a wonderful thing to give to a new mom or an expectant mom.
Oh, that's so nice. That was our hope. Really both, Pamela and I both, when we started working on this book, we were like, I wish I had this book when my first child, because even working with these books every day and working with children's books, there's still stuff I didn't know. And I look back now and I wish I had all of this information in one place. And even just like what we're trying to do in the book is just encouragement, and just to dial down the judgment, dial down the pressure for parents. I think it's a book that really could, and that's what we're hearing, right? We're hearing that people are reassured by it as much as they're getting full information. And that makes me happy.
Yeah, no, I think it really is very, very valuable. And so we've kind of talked a little bit about newborn and a little bit about toddlers too. Do you have a couple of titles you could say?
Oh, wow, there's so many. For board books, so this is a little interesting, thing that we're suggesting in the book. All the great picture books, right, that have won the Caldecott Medal, right, which is the picture book equivalent of the Newbery, those don't work so well as board books, we find. Board books need to be simpler, and the visuals and the language need to be simpler. So for board books, so we're saying wait until a little bit longer for like Where the Wild Things Are, all of the picture books, the ones that, Sylvester and the Magic Pebble, the classics that I grew up with that I loved, and even, the ones that are wonderful, winning the award today, the Sophie Blackall, Hello Lighthouse, that, wait until your child is like 3 or 4 and won't rip the pages of a regular board book. We have our list, we really, agonized over the lists of books.
I bet you did, yeah.
We tried to give you kind of a starter kit for your baby and your newborn. So the board book, let's see, I'm trying to remember now, the board books we have for the babies, it's the Sandra Boynton books. I think everyone should have, a lot of books about babies. Babies like to look at other babies. So you definitely have at least one or several. I had several books that they're just faces of babies making different expressions, but the babies love them. So the ones we like are it's called Mrs. Mustard's Baby Faces, and she's got who's the author? It's Jane Wattenberg, and she's got 3 or 4 of these now. Very diverse babies, all different races, genders, very friendly, and babies, and lots of colors in the background. You want the Sandra Boynton books. The Karen Katz, I really like her. They're very sweet and snuggly books. Where is Baby's Belly Button, and books about kisses and hugs and all of that. The Llama Llama books I really love. So what's another one that I Mary, I love Mary Murphy. Do you know the Mary Murphy board books?
Yes.
She's a genius. So I just go to town, go into the board book section of your bookstore and see which ones you think would appeal to your baby. But remember, they like nice bright colors, few words, well chosen, like the Sandra Boynton books that you remember. A cow says moo, a sheep says ba, 3 singing pigs say la la la. Dr. Seuss, there's a few board books, Dr. Seuss oriented board books. Dr. Seuss really works better later because he's really more about that phase when they're learning to read.
Humor,
Hold off on Dr. Seuss maybe. Eric Carle, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, works great as a board book, and they stick their finger through. I could Maisie. I love the Maisie books. Maisie is great because it's very non-gender stereotyped. They're animals, and I love that. Maisie is I remember my son was like, Maisie's a boy, but obviously the girls are going to think Maisie's a girl, So so there's so many board books. Just go to town on the board books. A little bit older, then you start with the picture books. Now this is where you have to remember, picture books are an art form. They are for everyone. So you're going to enjoy the picture books, hopefully as much as the kids. John Klassen, if you read the John Klassen books to your kids, like you'll marvel at, I want my hat back, and you will marvel at how dark the humor is. There's a lot of, there's murder between animals, and they love it. And I think you will too. So just enjoy it. Just go spend some time, in the bookstore with the librarian in the library, exploring. Find the ones that are going to be a fun part of your family life. Because I promise you, these are books that are going to create memories in your family. When your kids grow up, you mention the books or hand them a copy of the picture books that you read to them as a child, and it's an incredible flood of emotion and memory, very, very powerful. So that, when you have a baby at home now, that's in your hands. You're creating memories now that are going to be very, very powerful when your child is, graduating from college.
Right. Well, our book was Alexander the No Good, Very Bad Day.
I love that.
And the fallback in the household was, we're going to move to Australia. Which sounds okay right now, but anyway. Okay, so after toddler, moving along, there's the emerging reader, which is like kind of 4 to 6, maybe 7.
Right. Well, so the big message we have for this age group is don't rush reading independently. There is no evidence. All the research shows that it does not matter what age your child learns to read. There is no advantage. That 4-year-old neighbor who's reading already, people are like, oh, but my 6-year-old isn't reading it. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong. Every brain is different. And again, here we have the gender difference. The brains of boys are ready to read a year later than, on average, than the brains of girls. Your 6-year-old boy who's still not picking it up yet, that's fine. He's not, unless you see other signs that he might have ADHD or dyslexia, he's on track. So back off. Let the teacher teach your child how to read. And still at that age, yes, you do want to do what you can to support that move into independent reading. So, again, it's books with lots of images that support the words. This is where, Dr. Seuss really revolutionized it. Easy to memorize, because memorizing is great in the process of reading. If they memorize the words already and they see them on a page, there's going to be a day where suddenly those shapes of those letters and the text that they've memorized is going to click, that's connected. So, lots of people suggest these days there's a move to reading through cartoons, so a lot of the picture books and the early readers are in a comics format, so, Mac Barnett has a new early reader called with the Jack books.
Yes,
They're the Jack
yes,
books, but if you look at them, they look like comics, and something about the panels are really good. Like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, and that's all part of the process of learning to read. So look for comics, look for lots of art, look for comics, and don't pressure, don't worry. Everybody learns to read. Even the kids with dyslexia, it takes a lot longer. They need to learn special techniques, but they do learn to read. And your role as the parent is, will they want to read?
Yes. Well, you talk about along that line of reading and learning to read. Some countries in Europe actually don't teach their children. The schools don't approach reading until they're a little bit older.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
In Germany and Scandinavia, they don't formally teach reading. Now, of course, some kids teach themselves on their own, right? At 5 or 6, and that's great. But what are you doing in the classroom? I personally walk into a kindergarten classroom and the teacher's standing in front pointing to letters and making them, why? It's not, the child whose brain is not ready to do that cannot do it in kindergarten. And so, but there's a lot of curriculums that the teachers have to follow, whereas in Germany and Scandinavia, what they've realized is those are really important years for other kinds of learning, right? So you could take aside the children who are ready to read in small groups and work on reading with them, but for group instruction time, why not focus on math? Because guess what? Every 5-year-old brain can do math processes, and 6-year-olds. Social emotional learning, art, science, you can even, basic science concepts. So, so it's a little unfortunate, and it's here that we have so much pressure on learning to read. And then you realize like, oh, they learned to read. Why did I spend a year worrying they learned how to read? Like that wasn't actually my job. So yeah, I think really keeping fun around it and really just kind of, I recommend, now I might be a radical, don't know what level, they have these letter levels.
Right, exactly.
Don't know what letter your kid is on. Another study we found showed that it was very arbitrary, even how they assigned these letters to specific books. A lot of librarians now are even saying like, I'm not going to use those letters, so the more you can not be yourself associated with this apparatus at school that is coming down on this little 6 and 7-year-old,
right? Yeah.
The better, I think, for as far as creating a culture in your home that is positive around reading.
And based on what you said earlier, excuse me, about audiobooks, it sounds like you should keep them in the picture too, because
oh yeah, well, especially if you think your kid has signs of dyslexia or your kid is dyslexic, audiobooks are fantastic because your 8-year-old who is dyslexic can handle the content of the books that his friends are reading. He just can't decode the letters.
Right.
So he can experience those books on audio, and then he's not left behind, and that's really important.
And how about we've talked about picture books, for the toddler, but and sometimes when you get to the emerging reader, your child is so proud and it's chapter books, but yet picture books are still very important to that age group.
It's so true that they never grow out of picture books. So be very careful about which ones you push aside. And now, especially for the kids who are fact seekers, who like nonfiction, so many great books now for the elementary school years, biographies and history are actually picture books, right? So, and that, they wouldn't work for a 5-year-old. They're not. A 5-year-old really, doesn't, I was realizing I have the, whereas I had, like another Caldecott winner, this book.
Oh, that's so beautiful, yes.
Of Basquiat by Javaca Steptoe, Radiant Child. It's a Caldecott winner. It's a picture book. The art is fantastic. But it's not meant for a 4-year-old. It's really, I think a good reader for this book is 7, or 8 or 9. I would read this book to 4th graders, and I think a lot of teachers are. This is one other thing. I walked into my son's, 3rd grade classroom, and I was thrilled that the teacher had picture books all everywhere, so I think a lot of teachers get it too, that picture books are just a great thing for those early elementary years. And even going up to teenagers, again, like people crave illustration and imagery. And I think for many years we kind of have denied it to children once they pass that, what we call the picture book age, and it's coming back strong.
Well, because a lot of them have, you know, the back matter and everything. You can kind of launch an interest in something.
Well, you know, this was, I mean, you probably know more about this than I do, but as I understand it, this was one of the great things. I know there's a lot of controversy around Common Core, but one thing that Common Core did bring in is less textbooks and more actual book books
right.
To teach history and to teach social studies. And so a lot of those books that are in their classrooms are nonfiction picture books.
Yes, and then so important. Yes. Okay, well, how about, you know, do you have a couple of titles for that, you know, emerging reader that you you've mentioned?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so again, I'm biased toward heavy illustration. So I like, okay, for 6 and 7-year-olds, one of my favorite series is the Dory Phantasmagorie series by Abby Hamlin. Do you know these?
Yes.
These are so great. It's a girl who is the youngest of 3, and her name is Dory, but her nickname is Rascal because she's a bit of a rascal, and she doesn't, you know, she has this imaginary life. What I love about these books is she has an imaginary life that she mixes up. She has, you know, a whole cast of characters of her. She has a fairy godfather. She has a witch who, you know, is always trying to get in her business, you know, and these all exist in her imagined Mrs. Gobblecracker, one of the great characters in children's literature. And so that's the first thing I will recommend. You know, my youngest son, this is again something I probably did something wrong, but the first book that he read that had a girl main character and liked, you know, was Dory Phantasmagorie. So you know, that to me, I will always have a soft spot for this book because I thought he was a kid who really wanted to read about like cars and, you know, stereotypical boy things as much as,
yeah.
But he loved Dory Phantasmagorie. You know, this is the Dogman years, the Wimpy Kid years. What else for emerging readers? What else do we have in here? I'll think of more, but really, you know, and if you want to go back to the classics, you know, Beverly Cleary, you know, Ramona is in kindergarten, Ramona the Brave, but that's a great book for second graders, you know, first and second graders to kind of look back on Ramona, you know, and a wonderful new series that is just starting is Renee Watson, who's African-American, but grew up in Oregon, in Portland, like, you know, near where Beverly Cleary's Klickitat Street is. She has a new series that's sort of based on Ramona-like series. So, you know, look for Renee Watson, look for, you know, the authors that you like will often have a sort of, you know, like Laurel Snyder, who I love, has Charlie and Mouse. Is a really nice,
those are favorites.
Love those. Charlie and Mouse, two brothers. Charlie and Mouse are 4 brothers. That's a great, really first reader series. Patricia McLaughlin, who is, you know, obviously is a titan of children's literature. You know, Sarah Plain and Tall, and, you know, many other books. I love her series that she does called Barkus for the first reading. You know, it's a little red-haired girl who has a dog named Barkus who talks. You know, another good series. Again, dogs are big in this.
Yeah, they are.
King and Kayla, I really like. This is a series, a girl and her dog, and the dog really solves the mysteries. It's a mystery series. A lot of kids like mystery solving at that age. So so look for those, you know, really, again, getting to know your own kid and what's going to interest your kid. But there's really great early readers out there now. They used to be really boring, but they're fun now.
Well, then we'll move along a little bit. Those are great suggestions, though. But for your next group, your age group is middle grade, but it's not middle school.
Right. I mean, you hear this, I'm sure, all the time in the library, right? Yeah. That people think middle grade sounds like it's middle school, right? This is the next big group of children's literature, but it's actually ages 8 to 12, right? And these are the books, this is what we, you know, if you don't know that much about children's books, this is probably what you think of as a children's book. So it's Charlotte's Web.
Right.
You know, it's A Wrinkle in Time. It's, you know, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. You know, these are middle grade. These are the novels for, you know, kids in those middle years at the end of elementary school right into the beginning of middle school. So there's new classics being written all the time for this age group, 8 to 12. Like there's so many good ones. Kate Dicamillo, for example.
Oh, yes.
You know, just go to the Kate Dicamillo shelf at the library. You know, she's been the national ambassador for children's literature. She's won the Newbery. You know, she's just incredible how she, you know, I mean, a lot of her books are read in school, right? So my son's entire 4th grade class now is reading Because of Winn-Dixie. But just look for, you know, anything Kate Dicamillo. Christopher Paul Curtis, you know, he is amazing middle grade books. He again, you know, the Watsons Go to Birmingham. A lot of his books are in schools now. You know, they're African-American historical novels, some of them set in the civil rights era, some of them set in slavery times. But the difference, I love, first of all, he's funny, and his voice just, you know, carries you away with the storytelling and the energy. But also what I love about his book set in slavery times is I'm pretty sure he's Canadian or he's lived in Canada. So it's just kind of a relief that the African Canadian characters, some of them are escaped slaves, but it opens up some of the stories we hear about slavery to have them set in Canada. So Christopher Paul Curtis, I love. Again, the graphic novel, this is middle grade graphic novels. Raina Telgemeier, you know, everyone loves Raina Telgemeier.
Yes.
Drama, Smile. The new book she has, Guts, I really highly recommend for pretty much, if you have a 10-year-old, your 10-year-old should read Guts right now. It's about anxiety. It's about a girl dealing, and so many of our kids have anxiety, you know, that are in clinical levels. And it turns out Raina Telgemeier, you know, this incredible heroine of children's lit, she really suffered as a child from anxiety. So you know, get those Raina Telgemeier books in front of your grade schoolers. I mean, I could go on and on. So ask me something more specific.
Okay. Well, actually, you know, if we think about moving on or a transition to teen, maybe would also be, you say in your book, be the pipeline, not the gatekeeper.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is again something that's so hard right now, because one of our biggest roles really is just giving the books to your kids when you're younger. You know, don't express your judgments, don't, you know, edit too much, but it's actually, I think, one of the hardest things. You know, another really interesting study showed a lot of kids who said they haven't read a book recently, and they said, why? And it's like, I can't find a book I like. It really comes down to that, right? So at your job as a parent, get them books they like, put them in their hands. Like, you know, I mean, obviously that's your job as a librarian, which is why we tell people, let the librarians help you, you know? They know, you know, but yeah, so that's really what it comes down to, is just giving your teenager books that they like. You know, at this point, you're just not really needed so much as far as, you know, they probably have established their taste. You can definitely broaden. You can suggest they might try something that you think they would like, but they're probably going to say no. But you put it in their space, and maybe when you're not looking, when it doesn't look like they're giving in, they will pick it up, you know. But yeah, so again, it's just finding a way to create opportunities for books to be in your kids' hands that they will like. So you know, this is now obviously not so much in play, but one thing we recommend is, like, just, you know, when you're out doing errands, I have to stop in the bookstore. You know, I mean, for me, it's because I always have to buy gifts, because I've made this commitment to always buying books as gifts. But, you know, just make a quick stop in the bookstore, go do your thing, and let your teenager wander, you know. And, you know, I find, like, one thing, even when we were, you know, our family was in harder economic times at one point, like, I would never buy a book for myself, you know, but I would always find I would find a way to spend that, you know, $8.99 on that, you know, paperback for my kid, you know. So if there's a way you can work it into your budget, I know it's really hard right now. Or you can just get the lists of the books that they like, and if it's not in the budget at all, go get them from the library.
Well, I mean, if we move on and to talk about teen books, there is not a gritty subject that a teen book would not explore. And so, but as parents, this could be maybe even an entree to discussing some topics that you might otherwise shy away from.
No, it's really true. It is just like we all know teenagers can, with a swipe of their finger on their phone and on the internet, get the most, appalling and worrying content, right? And anything they're curious about, they're Googling, and what comes up might not be something you're that happy about, so why not find books that deal with these topics, or use it, or if you see that your child is reading, suicide is a really powerful example. Have that conversation of, when they're reading, there's so many teen books that feature characters, unfortunately, who are thinking about suicide or who have committed suicide. It's a good chance to have that really important conversation with your kid about mental health, about what support is out there, drugs, again, like when characters in books are struggling with this or experimenting, it's a chance to talk to your kid about that. And it's not about them, it's about the book. So yeah, if you've started this tradition in your family of using books as springboards for conversation, that really pays off when they're teenagers.
There are a couple of books that you, would recommend off the top of your head just for?
Well, the nice thing is that the teenagers really love these books. So like, for example, The Hate You Give, if you're struggling in your family to talk about, social justice issues or police brutality against African Americans, The Hate You Give is a really good treatment of this subject, and kids love it. It's really readable. It's really great characters. The writing just moves. She's just a wonderful writer, and there, it's not surprising that it was made into a movie, right? So many YA books become movies because YA writers know how to move it along. There's no wasted words in a YA book because they know they're going to lose their audience if they're not, really bringing it in paragraph 3. So I would say that, right now, race is a topic in YA and being handled like by just the best writers. You have Angie Thomas with The Hate You Give. You have Jason Reynolds, the new poet laureate,
National Book Ambassador. Yeah, Children's Book Ambassador.
Oh, Children's Book Ambassador. Yeah. Right. He has a book. He just did a book about a guide to racism, but with Ibram X. Kendi. I'm blanking on the title.
Stamped.
Right. I'm sorry?
Stamped. Yes.
That,
amazing.
You want your kids to understand how racism works, how it affects them, and how they can fight it, whether they're Black or white or anything, get that book. Jason Reynolds knows how to talk to your kid. That's all I can tell you. There's so many others right now. Elizabeth Acevedo is another one, Dominican American author, poet, like who, people don't realize teenagers actually love poetry. There's fewer words on the page, for one thing.
Lots of white space. Yeah.
Like Elizabeth Acevedo, who comes from the slam poetry tradition. So there's like a hipness around her language and her poetry. And so she's just doing an amazing job talking to kids about, being bicultural, navigating between, your parents' immigrant culture and you trying to grow up as American, So there's just so many great YA authors right now that, do the slightest bit of talk to your friends, or if you have, maybe your kid isn't a great reader, but that one of their friends is, strategically ask the friend, oh, what are you reading? That's one of my favorite things to do with kids, because I think it's really important to talk to your kids' friends, and no matter what age they are, but it's hard, sometimes to talk to kids. What's your favorite book? What book are you reading? And again, you're gathering information that you can bring for your own kid.
Well, I think that, you know, that is so true. And the new books are coming out all the time. And one of the nice things about your book is the lists are the old favorites, but they're also the new ones. So
yeah, we really worked hard to find that balance. And of course, there's, you know, hundreds more we could have included.
I know, I know. Well, one of the tips that you give just for general is when you start to read your book, even if it's to a newborn or a toddler all the way up and you're reading as a family, to talk about, to read the title and then read the author and illustrator.
Right.
Well, to How to Raise a Reader, you have 4 illustrators. You want to finish up by talking a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a really fun thing. So when we did the digital version of How to Raise a Reader on the New York Times website, we only had one illustrator, and it was Dan Yaccarino, who does just amazing babies. We loved how he drew babies, and he was really good online, this sort of graphic quality. But our publisher, Workman, had the idea of using different illustrators for the different stages, so that, because illustrators kind of specialize, a lot of them, in an age, or they sort of capture a certain age perfectly. So Dan obviously is like amazing with the babies, so we brought him in for the book too. And then then we have Lisk Feng does the emerging readers, and she's a Chinese illustrator, and she's incredible, like just sort of a wonderland vibe that she gives. And then Vera Brosgol did middle grade, who is, as you know, she's an author and illustrator too. Some of her graphic novels are just fantastic. Her picture books, you know, Leave Me Alone, The Little
Be Prepared. Yeah.
Be Prepared is her middle. Yeah, I love that middle grade summer. That would be a great like summer camp book for kids. They can't go. My kids.
I know.
But Be Prepared is a fantastic summer camp graphic novel. So Vera does the middle grade, and you know, she made a poster too. If you buy the book at Barnes and Noble, they might still have some. There's a poster that comes with the book with Vera's intro to the middle grade thing, which is great. And then Monica Garwood does the YA, and she's a little bit more sophisticated, conceptual, like cool. So that was really fun to see that. And we hope that as you go through the book, you'll get a feeling of like how kids develop and the different kinds of things that are going to appeal to them in the different ages.
Well, all of this has been amazing. I think I'm almost out of questions, but not out of enthusiasm for How to Raise a Reader. And Maria, thank you so much for your
Kathie, this has been fantastic, and I hope everyone in Gaithersburg got something out of this. I'm sorry that we couldn't be there with you to celebrate all of these books and all of the reading that we're doing, probably even more now, right?
Yeah. So thank you, and thanks to the Gaithersburg Book Festival. So.
Yes, thank you to everyone, and happy reading.
Here, Maria, I've got Llama Llama.
Oh, wow, and the Marlins. I think Elephant and Piggy, or is that Pete the Cat?
Yeah, Piggy and Gerald, there you go. All there for the young ones.
All great.
You guys, this was fantastic. Maria and Kathie, thank you for taking the time to discuss such an important topic with us today. We loved having you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd love to thank all of you for being with us for today's watch party. It goes without saying that we highly encourage you to pick up your copy of How to Raise a Reader by visiting and supporting our partner, independent bookstore Politics and Prose. You can click on the link in the description box that we have below to order your copy. Today's presentation, sadly, was the closing program of the 2020 VGBF. However, the fun does not have to end. You can continue to enjoy each fabulous author presentation video and all of the children's activities we've made available by visiting us at GaithersburgBookFestival.org. When May 15th, 2021 arrives, we hope to be back outside with you, once again in the park, hopping from tent to tent on a beautiful spring day. Until then, my friends, I've been your virtual Gaithersburg Book Festival host, Phil Kaminsky. Have a safe summer, and as always, keep reading.